We are live. All right. So here we are. We got our crack team of three whole people. We're going to talk about social media because as HJ was telling me, I'm old and I've been doing this for a long, long time. But
I put it
HJ
in
is,
nicer terms, but yes.
yes, but HJ is the actual expert here. So maybe we should start with him and Great American Satan can just chime in whenever they feel like it.
I mean, this is the thing. There's not a lot of people who can maybe say they're experts and all that, but social media is ridiculously popular. It's almost guaranteed you've had some experience with it. So even as just sort of a consumer of it, you do have some knowledge. So yeah, it's one of those subjects essentially.
Yes, if only it didn't suck.
Oh, I have opinions. So
Yeah.
I just one quick word for me. Um, the I super unprepared last second dash down here in a big pile of business, and my power on my laptop is probably gonna like cut me off at some point. So maybe I should say my parts earlier so that when I disappear inevitably become like
the
disappeared
ghost.
like a
Yeah, sure. That's fine. Why don't we let you go first then?
yeah.
Explain social media to everybody.
Okay. Don't have to explain social media to people because they already got they've a lifetime of experience with it, or at least a last couple of horrible decades of it. So, so y'all know what it is. What's it taking the place of is kind of an interesting thing. As something that's like so integral to our society now, you have to like step back for a second and be like, what the hell was going on before this crap existed, right? There's various other kinds of fora for people to communicate with each other, right? Of course, there was like on the internet, there was like various like primordial versions that PC's got surely got some opinions about. And
Uh,
then there's but before that even like right before popular internet, what were people doing instead of social media at that time? There's of course going to church, going to clubs, hanging out, family reunions, all that of the full nine. People that have fairly integrated families where they still have they're not all bulk broken up to scatter to the winds. We'll have like every little birthday party for every little random kid. Like you get like just a couple of families together and you basically be having birthday parties for kids all year long, right? So there was like some communication that happened between people. And in terms of the other thing that social media provides, the other thing is basically news. And for that, there was the newspaper, right? Newspapers used to exist. There's some kind of hollow shell of what they used to be now, but that was a thing once upon a time. So, if we are to we were in terms of like how do you make social media better, we kind of got to address the different things that it does and what we would do to make each of those aspects better. That's a initial thought.
Good call.
Anybody else
Good
got
call.
okay.
on that one?
Well, and we
I
should
would just,
also. I don't know. Go
oh, go
ahead,
ahead.
DJ. Okay. We should also bear in mind that there's also different types of social media. Like email, you can kind of consider a social media of sorts. I mean, it's pretty terrible in regards of visibility and all that, but it's one. So there's definitely ones that use audio to different extents. There's ones that use video to different extents. There's ones which use text to different extents. There's ones which are more interactive than others. Like Signal, you can sort of think of as a form of social media, but it's not normally what we sort of think of as that, since it's not very interactive per se. Versus, like Facebook or Twitter, sort of the canonical, yes, this is social media and all that. But like blogs, discussion forums, and all that, all news groups, in fact, going even back earlier into internet history, all sort of qualify as social media of a sorts. So you kind of have to, since there are so many different varieties, you kind of have to narrow in on specific types and all that to sort of be like, okay, what exactly do we mean, when we're talking about this positive or negative aspect of social media and all that. So you do have to be sort of clarified on that.
Yeah, and just to bring things back to the ancient past, I got to point out that one of the hot social media back in the 1970s, for instance, was ham radio.
Hmm.
where we have all our antisocial nerds who just sit in their little dark basements and tune in to different frequencies around the world. But that was social. It's just that kind of social media was catering to a very narrow section of society. And I think part of the problem we're dealing with now is that modern social media is just huge. It's just everything. You don't have to be a genius or a tinkerer to get on any of these media. It's just so easy. It's just not fair. And also, after the 70s and the 80s, the kind of social media I was involved with is for instance DeckNet, which wasn't even internet stuff. It was they would every month they would send you this great big mag tape that you would put on your big computer, your VAX 750, and you'd swap things and you'd send a tape back to everyone. Yeah, so there's different ways to do it. And again, I think the point I want to make is it's who you're talking to that makes a huge difference and how easy it is to get in touch with them.
Exactly.
I think that in terms of the idea of narrowing it down, we should probably like as much as like all you could get a very interesting book out of all of the different types of early proto social media or early smaller narrower platforms. The one that's kind of the big problem now, and the one that's kind of replaced so much of other things that used to be, and is the one that has everybody on it, right? It's kind of like focus the discussion on that, I think. The universal social media platforms or nigh universal social media platforms. What do we do about those things? How can we make them better? What can we do with the problems that they've generated?
Yeah, sort of the
Yeah,
massive ones. Sorry,
yeah,
mass
it's
media. I mean.
it's all many to many is our problem. Is we've got everyone trying to talk to everyone else, and that creates a real problem with conflicts of interest and various groups at loggerheads with each other, and it makes it a kind of unpleasant experience.
Yeah, and that's sort of to narrow in down on the problem itself. This is essentially a form of community. And what we've got essentially are debates over what community standards should be. I have a very different idea of what, speech should be made public on the internet, for instance, than, say, a right-wing troll, or even, like an anarcho-communist or something like that. But in some extent, if we are sort of thrown into this big giant pile where we're all sort of sitting within a shared locality and all that, we're sort of, forced to sort of rub shoulders with one another and, set up, various standards for how we interact with one another. And this is sort of the issue, is it's basically moderation, but moderation not as most people think of it. Most people think moderation is just, oh, you kick out the Nazis and everything's done. No, 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 no. That's the simplistic view. Moderation is actually far more complex, and it's about building and, creating communities and all that and maintaining those community standards. So yeah, it's very complicated.
Yeah, well, one thing I want to mention is you mentioned right-wing trolls. Right-wing trolls are not using this to communicate. They're using this to silence people. And I think that creates a very different dynamic than our friendly local anarcho-communists who just want to discuss mutual aid with all their buddies. And the right-wing trolls they're just trying to make noise and shut everyone down. Uh, that's a whole different problem, I think.
Well, yeah, there is also, it's not just a matter of who is included, but also who is excluded and how are they excluded. Do you exclude people by making them, by sort of blocking their access to it? Like Facebook, for instance, had a real name policy, in fact, probably still does, in fact, where you must be on there with your real name. Well, how does that affect transgender people where their real name doesn't match up with their preferred name and all that? Now you're sort of getting into jurisdictional issues where, if they live in a transphobic part of a country and all that, they can't legally get online because the names they can't really get online because their names don't match. So they're either forced to dead name themselves or something along those lines. But it can also just be in more subtle forms. If you flood the zone with bullshit, you make it that much tougher for, people who are, targeted by that bullshit or, offended by it to actually sort of fight back. Spam is as much, a moderation issue as anything else. So this really sort of comes in other forms, not just, who do you include, but also who do you exclude.
And
Yeah,
I think that, oh, go
oh,
ahead.
well, there's a there's man, society. This gets super super broad. And one of those things is so to me there's kind of two main issues: is sort of information security, and like the sort of spectrum between making it so secure nobody can get onto it, and making it so making it so that just anybody can get in, and rampant fraud can happen. Moderation is like related to information security, is on that same kind of a deal. And then the other one is the other aspect is uh, what is a just society? I really feel like the problem of everybody being on the same in the same forum and the same is basically bringing back those Greek philosopher discussions and making them extremely relevant to this moment, which is, what is the best society? And like part of that can be as simple as like, who do you let speak and who do you shut the hell up? That people will exclude themselves from society on the basis of disability or axes of oppression. Some people will just be like, I don't feel like I could do if I could hang here for a second, and they just won't even show up. And like that's sometimes that can be it was not even the fault of the community that's been set up, or like Facebook or like Twitter or whatever. Some people were just going to like self-select out of that whole scene, and there are, if you make society contingent on being part of a social media platform, anybody who like was too scared to be on there in the first place, somebody who's too paranoid to hold down an email or a phone number consistently, or somebody who's just got like a mad social anxiety, like is trans in a country that's is legally transphobic. There's like so many people that are just gonna like not even show up to the conversation in the first place. And then like you could end up in a situation where somebody's all like, hey, we're gonna make a decision by all of us because we're all here. Maybe there's somebody that isn't there yet, or at the moment. Homeless people would be a huge amount of a extremely common demographic for people that can't hold down an email address or a phone number. These things are often tied together, and like and if you're making showing up on Facebook contingent on having a consistent email address and phone number, forget it. Homeless people, like 99% of them, are like right out.
Mm-hmm. Agreed.
And then the question is, that many people would ask, that I'm not going to ask, but many people would ask is, do we want those homeless people in our social media? Because there's a kind of social exclusion that goes on beyond simply, oh, you're so poor that you do not have a cell phone that can handle this. And then we get into the point where you're a Republican and you say, no, we just don't want them on.
Yep.
No way
Okay.
to deal with that.
Yeah, intentional exclusion versus just like incidental exclusion that
Yeah.
happens to benefit certain people. Yeah.
Yeah, as you can imagine, this is mirroring a lot of society's own issues. It's sort of implied by social media. We're essentially arguing over society in a microcosm. But yeah, that does mean a lot of it sort of carries over in a lot. But I mean, maybe we should.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, no, no,
The
no.
problem of having
You've
no
got
structure
limited
on this.
battery. You've got limited
That's
battery,
true.
so.
Yeah, I mentioned yeah, my laptop could explode at any moment. It's still got a good bit of I'm more than 50% right now. Um, sorry, somebody made me think of something, and then I like lost it during that discussion.
Well, if you
God.
want, I can try and anchor the discussion a little bit because
Yeah.
it's sort of saying, okay, well, social media bad is sort of like an undercurrent underneath here. And it's like, well, okay, well, hang on a sec. What social media? Why is it bad? And is this sort of like a blanket all social media bad, or is there some good social media out there? Like I was literally actually looking at a post in my social media feed where, someone's like, oh, so social media is terrible and all that. And this person's like, well, I'm on this social media network and everything's fine. And they're like, oh. And they just sort of completely ignored it and walked away. And that's like, you're just going to jump to the blanket assertion that all social media bad without sort of recognizing that social media can be different in some ways.
I suppose that it can, but literally every environment that has human beings in it has a possible problem of bullying in it. And like sometimes that can be more, it may not, things may look fine, but really not be because like the undercurrent of that. Yeah, when you get to, sorry, when you get to, this situation of, man, I'm totally distracted by something. That's okay. Um, I don't want to say about stuff.
Uh-oh, did
Man.
I nerd snipe you?
Oh yeah, bullying. Okay, bullying. Right. So
Ah, yeah.
bullying. We're in the United States, at least, within my generation. I'm sure some a little bit before and afterwards. PZ, correct me if this was different for you. Um, the junior high is kind of like the moment in a person's life when bullying is like reigns supreme over everything, where you like learn the hard way, like what people feel and think about each other, and it's disgusting and horrible. Junior high is basically the agenda for social agenda for everybody is set by so just like the worst people, the most cruel, just I don't want to like use pathological language for it, but people, the kind of people that would be into monkey torture videos, right? Like that person is setting the social agenda for fucking everybody. And like that's when you get by the time you get to older and you get into a workplace and stuff like that, that bastard has not fucking gone away. He just learned to talk different, right? So, that hey, that person over there is fat. That person over there is weird. Let's talk shit about them around the water cooler. That person shows up and they're like, everybody's quiet. Stuff like that. And like the social media platform that looks good on its surface still has that shit going on. I'm sure of it.
Yeah,
That's all.
all it takes is just one toxic person to show up and they can silence a whole channel of communication.
Hmm.
Oh,
I mean, I
there's a good example of that actually that I just talking about this morning. Uh, there's a my dad like has this like place where veterans can hang out or something like that. Like a lot of them people that were home have been or are currently homeless, just like poor veterans kind of a hall, right? They go there, get some coffee, and hang out. One guy showed up and started basically just doing this like nonstop haranguing, super loud MAGA rhetoric. Day in, day out, day in, day out, and like just like basically trying to like if you weren't on that page, he would verbally batter you until submission, and he isn't going away, and he's driving everybody else away, except for the people that can sort of tolerate it. One toxic person, no rules. What the hell are you gonna do about that guy? You can't, he meets the demographic criteria to be allowed to be there. But you know, he's making it horrible for everybody, and like how's that space moderated?
yeah,
Multiply that by like literally millions of people. And you see
yeah,
why how you see why the social media basically has been an element of modern genocides repeatedly now.
right. Yeah, so once upon a time I was active on the Internet Infidels Forum. It's a group for atheists and so forth, and you got your little subgroups that you could join to talk about specific topics and all that sort of thing. And it was fine for a while, but then there were a couple of people who had a hobby horse who would show up wherever you are and just the entire discussion would disintegrate under their influence. And, I got off of Internet Infidels many years ago just because it was just too aggravating. But what happened is a bunch of people also, because this forum software was everywhere, you could run it on your home computer and have people call in and do things, all that kind of cool stuff. And I tried going to a few of these smaller ones. It was the same problem that the trolls would follow everyone to whatever site they had. And then what's the moderator to do? Because they've got these conflicting desires. They want traffic, they want active conversation. If you start kicking people out, then everyone else stops talking because they don't want to get kicked out. And I don't know of a solution for that.
Oh, I do. Well, I think I do, I should
Oh,
say.
well, let's hear the magic solution.
Well, to sort of put this into greater context, what we're sort of dealing with is the two key questions when it comes to social media is who's in charge, how do they make money, or how do they keep the bill? This could range from how do they keep the infrastructure running and all that to how do they, dive into their giant, giant pools of cash or whatever, It's, this is
Donate to PZ's Patreon to keep free thought blogs going.
indeed, yes.
It's
But
cheap.
yes,
There's no danger yet. We're doing okay.
yeah. Yes. But yeah, okay. Well, let's, sort of take these questions, in turn for a lot of these social medias, like with Facebook, for instance. Who's in charge? Well, Mark Zuckerberg has an unusual sort of corporate setup whereby he's kind of, the CEO, but he's got a remarkable amount of control over everything. Like he can even sort of overrule the board of directors, if I recall correctly, and all that. So it's kind of, him in charge to sort of set the tone. But then he'll sort of defer down to lower lieutenants and all that to sort of set up other sort of systems and all that. And when it comes to things like moderation and all that, there is a sort of like a moderation team, which goes around and sort of handles that. But this also sort of means that has to be sort of like a centralized control system for this. You cannot just sort of, fire up, a computer and all that and say, hey, I'm part of Facebook over here and all that. Facebook is something controlled by Meta Inc. over on some servers over someplace else, and they've got their infrastructure and all that set up. And they basically, set the rules, control the rules. And in theory, I mean, they have, crackpot trained people on there to act as moderators and administrators. This is the whole benevolent dictatorship thing where, in theory, yeah, the best, government is a benevolent dictatorship. But benevolent for whom, in fact? And I mean, the problems with Facebook are legion. We've already talked about, promoting genocides and all that. But a lot of people have said for the longest time that, various minorities, trans people, etc., and have all been pretty much like, yeah, it's really just not safe or anything in that regards. And that, this is sort of baked into the system fundamentally. Because there's sort of like this centralized moderation thing and all that, it's never going to be... they basically sort of define the community standards in and of itself. People who are, underrepresented and all that, by definition, are not really going to be well represented within that. And it's going to be very difficult to accommodate them within sort of the mainstream, sort of the most populist kind of thing that's out there. Moderation, we can all sort of agree on the big things usually, although even nowadays kicking out the Nazis seems to be a little bit more controversial than it should be. But moderation, again, sort of boils down to there are some assholes you've got to kick out, and everybody's tolerance for what an asshole is really sort of varies. And how do they make money? Well, I mean, you can imagine setting up a billion person, something to actually handle like a billion people handling and all that is big, it's expensive and all that, especially when you say that it's now going to be all centralized and all that. So this means then that you've got to sort of find out ways to get money from it. And typically when it comes to these things, it's advertising and forcing people to engage with the platform itself. You sell ads to businesses, you find ways to trick your users into reading the thing more and more. So like Facebook's pivot to video, for instance. They're gambling that, putting more video content on there would get people to watch more and stay around more and thus see more ads, And so it's very much in their best interest to sort of get you essentially addicted to it. Sort of pulling in what people have sort of studied from gambling and all that, using those techniques to sort of get you addicted. The little bells that go off when you get notifications and all that to be like, hey, come direct your attention over here. And in the process, see our ads. You can imagine this creates a very toxic, very difficult to manage site, even if we sort of assume the best of intentions from the start. It's obvious that this is going to cause problems for anybody who's, steps even a little bit outside of what the norm should be, essentially. It's a terrible way to do it, and it really sort of breeds predatory behavior and all that. let's compare this with something like the Fediverse. This is a sort of a loose collection for a whole bunch of different protocols that allow people to communicate with each other. You've probably heard of Mastodon. Outside the Fediverse is sort of like a whole bunch of these different sites which team up and all that to come together. But they've got different protocols like New Social, Diaspora, and ActivityPub. ActivityPub is the most popular of them. And of ActivityPub, the various apps that sort of run on ActivityPub, the most popular of them is Mastodon. Well, who's in control of Mastodon? Whoever wants to be. Like, I am in charge of Free Thought Blogs' Mastodon instance. I set the rules. I say who's allowed on, who's allowed off. I act as moderator. I'm the one who's in control of speech. So I actually set the community standards in that regard. Not, Eugen Rocco, the creator of Mastodon. He creates the software, and thanks for that. But I'm the one who actually sets up the community and maintains it. It's basically me who's in charge. How do we pay for it? Well, right now, it costs $30 a year to run our Fediverse thing. I can pay for that out of my pocket. I really don't care. It's the Fediverse is cheap enough that pretty much anybody could actually just set aside, a couple of bucks a month and set up their own instance to run it. And when it's down that cheap, how do you pay for it? However you want. Like, we brought up PZ's Patreon, for instance. You can actually just shill the bills on that. And I've seen there's I think it's 10 Forward is another Mastodon instance that I'm quite familiar with. They actually have, monthly fundraisers where they say, hey, here's our bills, here's our expenses, here's our income, here's the ways you can actually sort of donate and all that. And they spend a lot more. I think it's more like about $500 or something a month to run theirs. But they're also a much larger server with thousands of active people. Whereas, ours, we've got like 2 really active people, PZ and me. So, it's a lot. We really don't need much infrastructure, and it works great in that regard. Now, you can imagine this leads to a very different community than what you'd encounter on Facebook or Twitter. Like, a lot of people complain about, oh man, the social media feeds, a lot is toxic. Mine's not. Like, none of those right-wing assholes pop up unless one of the left-wing people I follow says, wow, look at this right-wing asshole and what they did and all that. And like, I could also just choose not to follow those people and not get that news. Like, I do definitely want, news and information. So I follow a ton of, people who are into Canadian politics, who are into US politics and all that. So I get a fair bit of that myself, but I could easily just tune that out. My social media feed also contains wonderful posts from someone who's a mycologist, somebody who studies like ants and arthropods and all that. And currently they're sort of getting into animation. So they're posting all these little animated things of like ants sort of crawling around and all that. They have odd sort of, thank you, mycologist, however that's pronounced. But yeah, they've got all sorts of cute, sort of me feeds along those lines. There's instances devoted just to art, specifically like showing off your art. And I could, boost some of those more if I wanted. I follow a lot of, online comics and comedians via that as well. Geeky Steven, I think, is actually worth calling out. They basically just post jokes, whenever they can. Yeah, that injects a little bit of levity in there too. So my social media is not, a toxic waste dump by any means, and that's not going to change. Like, there is no way for Eugen Rocco to say, haha, I am not going to get enough money this month. I am going to start injecting ads. Nobody. I'm running my own software. I control that. You can't inject ads if you want to. Screw off, buddy. You can't. So it leads to a very different dynamic, and I think actually a much richer and nicer environment.
Everything's got an exploit, man. Everything's got an exploit. Who are you paying your $30 a month to?
That's an excellent point. If you were to look at who we're paying that $30 a month to, actually, they're okay. Their domains.
Oh, $30 a year. $30 a year. Yeah.
$30 a month. Yeah, a year. Yes.
So
that's actually
who's that pay? Who's your web hosting? Like who's that? Like, I mean, you don't have to say, but like is that who you're paying it to, or is it like something else, some other body?
No, domain name. 100% domain name. It's a self-hosted server, so that goes. Now, of course, if I were to tell you who our cloud host is, you would go, oh shit, they're evil, because they are, straight up. But they have a very generous free plan. So I pay $0 a month to basically run the site on that. So, and also that, I mean, how do we get our protections against distributed denial of service things? Cloudflare. Oh no, Cloudflare is evil. True. Not denying that. They also have a generous free tier. So I'm getting free protection, and sort of exploiting their architecture without really sort of charging anything. So, like, okay,
Any
I am exploiting people, but it's the assholes who are wanting to try and give me things for free.
in any time this changes though, like let's say the generous tier dries up, like
Mhm.
you got some vulnerability. Like I don't think that there's really any kind of a fortress to be had on the internet, you know?
Mhm.
Like particularly it depends on how Orwellian are the sons of bitches that are in charge of things now going to get. What are they willing to do in the pursuit of like trying to like lock everything down and shut everybody off? Like the what was that number on like what it was like in East Germany? Like it was like 1 in 5 people's a Stasi informant or something like that, right?
Mhm.
If you can like distribute your fascism, you crowdsource your fascism, like could they feasibly start like targeting any kind of social media out there that's even like slightly progressive and like shutting it down at the source, like go to the like your web hoster and say like,
Mhm.
hey, shut down this domain, and this domain, right?
Mhm.
Is that a thing that can be done? Will
Well, of
who's
course.
to say?
If you're
Yeah.
reliant on a domain, then yes. If someone, complains to the
Mhm.
domain host and says, "Hey, these people are assholes, shut them down," then yes. It actually, in fact, happened to Free Thought Blogs. However, if
Yeah,
you look at
that's
the
right.
domain host I'm using for,
Mhm.
our Mastodon instance, they're Canadian. They're a Canadian company, fairly large, fairly indifferent. I haven't heard a lot of, guff against them. And if that becomes a problem, there are actually other ones. I think Porkbun, for instance, is a cheap domain host and all that, but they really don't charge a lot, and I think they're much more independent. Basically what you're sort of asking for is, can someone shut down the DNS thing? Yes. But there are DNS providers who are more or less tolerant, and there are sort of other ways to sort of potentially get around it. So that is one avenue. Another approach is to basically say, well, Mastodon's full of child porn. Anyone caught running a Mastodon instance is thereby guilty of hosting child porn. Ergo, we're going to throw the book at you. That gets a lot tougher. But there are things such as onion services and all that that would allow you to sort of disguise where your host is. And so we could potentially just keep on going by throwing ourselves behind, an onion router of some sorts. Yeah,
I
and
was
that
think
might serve.
I was thinking about maybe a little bit of farther afield of topic, but like one well, not exactly. Social media right now is how people are communicate for the purposes of like organizing politically. And if you if it gets more aggressively locked down than it is right now, or otherwise shut down, and people keep getting like farther and farther afield, like we're like I don't know. I'm just picturing a situation where some people are like, haha, we bought a server farm in like in this island nation in the English Channel or whatever, like and like and then basically like that gets taken out by an illegal drone strike by the CIA or something like that. You know what I mean? It's like there is there anywhere in the world that you can freaking go? I mean, do we have to bring back like the handwritten propaganda passed off in alleys and stuff like that, and audio cassette tapes? What? How stupid could things get? I'm sorry, whatever. You know what I mean?
They could get very stupid. But the point is, though, how would we get to that point? Like, I mean, sure,
Mhm.
you could invent all sorts of, high-end things and all that, but somebody's going to need cloud services at some point. Somebody's going to have to find out a way to shut down, the Onion, the Tor network and all that. After a while, the need to sort of crush down and control these sort of other sites gets beyond, what anything could actually do. And like, and we're sort of getting into, sort of the far-flung things of, okay,
Okay.
this is attacks against sort of decentralized social media. But I mean, there's still issues with like centralized social media and all that. It's
And then centralized social media. I'm thinking about where we are right now. We're on
Mhm.
YouTube, right?
Mhm.
YouTube like rolls over for like just a full bore Nazi regime if it gets worse than it is now, right? And they're
Well,
like, it's
actually,
like
and in fact,
let's
speaking of
okay,
just not worse, they
yeah.
just recently announced they're actually allowing hate speech on the same way Facebook, did just
Yeah,
recently.
I feel like they made an announcement of that similar nature like a half year ago or something. It's
Mm.
almost old news by now. Maybe there's a newer one. But let's say, okay, now we've decided that we agree that trans people are evil, and then they like run an algorithm, and anybody is got a strong jaw and long hair is out. Like, like James Hetfield from Metallica is out. Goodbye. You know what I mean? It's just like like they can run algorithms to like detect content in videos so that they don't even need to have a moderator look at it, and then like disappear this conversation, right?
Mhm.
So
Yeah,
it's good times we live in.
it is. And there's various ways to go about it. I mean, we talk about the trade-offs of using social media. So I definitely think, Mastodon and other decentralized social media basically is not only far better than stuff like Twitter or anything like that. I think it's actually optimum. Like there is no better way to moderate mass social media than the Fediverse. Just straight up. Like there is no other way to actually do that. And feel free to challenge me on that. But the
The
point is though,
evangelists.
hmm? Oh, you're challenging me?
Yeah, I was just saying you're the evangelist here. Yeah, okay.
This is true, but this is, as you can imagine, I've been on Mastodon for, oh God, 4 or 5 years at this point. I literally run a server and all that. I've put a lot of thought into the topic, and yeah, I think I can defend it. But this also, let's not say that Mastodon doesn't have flaws. Like I am literally paying $30 a year to host my own Mastodon instance. What do you think a neo-Nazi is going to do when learning of that information? Like, what's stopping neo-Nazis from getting on the Fediverse too? And the answer is nothing. There's actually a very giant, Nazi presence on the Fediverse and all that. But we handle it by sort of blocking and moving on, essentially. There's a sort of a natural progress whereby, bigots sort of tend to flock together into instances and all that. And they sort of self-isolate themselves, and everybody else just sort of blocks them. And that sort of helps keeps things at bay. You know. Things also you like, okay, well, what happens when you get how do you deal with spam on the Fediverse and all that? And a lot of it is just you don't let anybody sort of join. This is a huge topic within the Fediverse in general is do you allow anyone to sort of come up and sign up, or do you actually have like what sort of process do you have for sort of being fairly restrictive? Free thought blogs is social thing is fairly restrictive and all that. But conversely, that also means we don't have a lot of problems with spam or anything like that. A lot of the larger instances within the Fediverse, specifically like Mastodon.social and all that, have huge problems with just being the sources of spam because they allow anybody to come on and have an account. So spammers just sign up for accounts and start spamming away. I think about a year ago, the big thing was actually some Japanese some Japanese Discord users who you had like a beef over video games or something like that. And, their response is actually write an automated script, which would go through every single Mastodon instance, try and create an account. And if it could create an account, go out and just start spamming everything saying, hey, this asshole over here, they're an asshole, hate them and all that. It's ridiculous. But I mean, kind of pointed out that, hey, you probably should not be allowing these open signups and all that.
This actually like starting to connect back to something I was thinking about on the information security side of things. There's this issue recently where the Social Security Administration was fight fraud that's supposedly rampant because like that's a big conservative talking point is that like social services are always being like a full of fraud. They'll look at all these people that shouldn't be getting things that are getting things and stuff like that, right? So in the spirit of trying to fight that, they've put in a measure where you have to like in order to change your bank information, you can no longer do it over the phone on Social Security. You have to do it either through their website, with various levels of security to it, or by going to a local office in person. And there's actually a not ridiculous justification for that policy. There is a lot of fraud that happens by phone actually with the Social Security Administration, like people calling and trying to scammers that got people's personal info, trying to redirect their payments to skeevy bank accounts. Of course, they can. Those people are got the skills. They could probably be doing the same thing through the website, which is still allowed, but whatever. But I was like just thinking about like how much everybody's personal information is compromised right now. How many people's social security numbers, mother's maiden name, address, all that kind of stuff is easy enough to find, right? Any website or any service you've ever had that asks for the last 4 digits of your social security number before a certain point in history in the United States, those your social security number was part of the first 5 digits of it were determined by where and when you were born. So if all they got's the last four, they've got the whole thing. All they have to do is compare it to historic information.
Mhm.
So, basically, what how can you verify people are who they are? And this is that gets with social media. That's like the big companies are trying to go like, oh, we're going to prevent spam by forcing people to dead name themselves and stuff like that, right? Um, I was thinking like one possible way around the issue of fraud with like social security would be everybody knowing everybody. Like what if you actually like busted out to social security offices to smaller and smaller community areas, and that those people, the job of the people that worked at that office would be to literally know everybody who's getting benefits in the area, right? So it's all like, I know this. I know it doesn't matter what this person's social security number is. I know who they are. I know where they live. Whatever is a weird idea, but it's like getting back to that primitive style of like how did we like trust each other before we had to like move society on the scale of thousands to millions of people. Like it was like, oh, I know who these people are because I've lived with them all my life or whatever. What if you could do that with it's still this approach to social media is similar. It's just like I will only let people in on a provisional basis if we know them personally, right? Should make a good case for who you are. Show me your online history. I'll like decide whether or not to let you in. Um, it's getting pretty it's getting pretty primitive. The downside of that is you can't automate this to you'd be really hard pressed to scale this to something that would work with millions of people. The biggest problem with Mastodon, the Fediverse in general, is that like it is impossible for it to have the level of reach and interconnectivity of something like a Blue Sky. It just
Mhm.
can't compete.
Yeah,
And that is a
that's true.
big draw. That is a big draw for those networks for things like Blue Sky, Facebook, etc. Is that is where everybody is. Um, you getting a share of the social media like pie, as it were. Getting an audience is one of the big challenges for like big companies are trying to come in the side hatch and like start up a new one. It's I don't know if little guys could even hope to compete with that. I don't know.
Well, and this gets back to control. Like, who is in control within here? Like, yes, it's true that, as you sort of talk about, this is kind of a big thing. The advantage of concentrating control into the hands of a few, like really I'm the only person who knows the email address or of anyone who's actually signed up to our, Free Thought Blogs thing and all that. Nobody else does. And, again, I'm the moderator and all that. So nobody else can kick, a dictator. Nobody else can kick PZ off of, Free Thought Blogs' as Mastodon instance other than me. And actually PZ can kick himself off, but yeah. But whatever.
I
You
feel so
know,
powerful. Okay.
indeed.
Yeah.
The flip side is though, running your own Mastodon instance, yes, it's cheap, but it also isn't, you have to have a little bit of knowledge involved with that. It's literally not just, push button, here we go and all that. There's infrastructure that has to be sort of set up. You can actually make things a lot easier. All you have to do is cede control to someone else. You don't have to set up you don't have to set up a social media account. You can give all that control over to Facebook. And then Facebook does what's needed with that. In many ways, this is sort of the siren call of these centralized services, is they make things a lot easier to sort of get on. But of course, you're also ceding control, and ceding control can have consequences. This is, another analogy, perhaps might help with this is I, got into baking for a little while there, and I was making my own Nanaimo bars. It was great to actually sort of come up with my own recipe, customize it and create something which just tasted so much better than the store-bought. But it was also a hell of a lot more expensive because I wanted full control over the ingredients and what was there. If I outsource that to a bakery, they can actually, do it for cheaper, streamline things and all that. But I also don't really get that nice, I'm not able to really customize it, and all that. I'm giving up control in favor for something else, and whether that's good or bad, obviously sort of depends on the context. Given that so many people consider social media to be bad, maybe we've ceded too much control to centralized services and all that, and we need to decentralize a little bit more to make things, to sort of get better community standards and such in that regard.
Well, but I
I
think it's inevitable that we have to surrender control for many things because we can't do everything. We can't have everybody in the country set up their own Mastodon instance and set up a local person to handle their social security and another person to handle their dental insurance.
Mhm.
We have to trust the institutions that do that, that the only way we can protect ourselves is by not ceding control to individual people, but having a set of, a bureaucracy, a set of policies, a set of rules that whoever is in there has to follow. I mean, one of the things that caused the rapid downfall of Twitter was, yeah, before we had general rules and we haggled over them and people who were implementing them badly and so forth. But where it really screwed up is when Elon Musk comes along and suddenly we have a dictator who's decided how everything has to work and who gets kicked off and who gets to stay on. And I think that's going to be a general issue that we have to have. We have to have institutions that are beyond individual humans.
the flip side of that is that there are types of institutions that help diffuse responsibility in a way that actually allows them to become increased progressively corrupt. I'm thinking of capitalism itself and the whole stock market shareholder arrangement, where it's just basically like the only once you got a company being publicly traded, the only responsibility that company has is to continually grow and make more profit. And then everybody's all like, "Whoa, what's the shareholders are all like more profit?" Then the guys are like, "We made profit by doing evil things," and they're all like, "I didn't do the evil things. I just asked you to give me more profit." Like if there's of course the profit motive is easy to remove from that equation when we're just talking about bureaucracy, but I can't help but think that practically any endeavor that beings could do falls into that whole uh you know Jeff Goldblum chaos theory thing of this level of control you're attempting, it's impossible. I just I don't know. I don't know if there's ever going to be a solution to any kind of human endeavor that doesn't have an element of social entropy to it that's going to make it worse and worse over time until it ends up being a disaster.
Well, and I would argue that Mastodon actually solves that. Well, the Fediverse, I guess I should say. Because a good data point I love to bring up in these things is, when Elon Musk bought Twitter and all that, there was this period where everybody sort of flooded into Mastodon. Like literally, the population of people on there sort of doubled or I think even tripled, very shortly. But if you sort of took a look at the stats from that time to be like, okay, how many, people here are running instances and all that? How many people are sort of clustered around instances? Those numbers stayed more or less constant. Because what actually tends to happen is, say, okay, we've got, a Mastodon instance or whatever of whatever kind. They want to sort of grow super big and all that and get a ton of more people on here. Well, the more people you have, the greater odds of assholes sort of coming in. But also, just in general, the tougher it is to form shared community values and standards within here. Inevitably, there's going to be some sort of dispute or split that causes people to go, oh, this is not going to sort of work for us. We need our own thing and all that. And so they split off and form their new group. And again, Mastodon makes this cheap and easy-ish. So they split off. Their little subcategory, now comes along and sets up the community standards their way, where they're doing things their way. And now the problem basically has resolved itself. We went from something which is just way too big to something which is much smaller and more manageable. And this is the tendency for what happens on the Fediverse itself. As these things happen, these communities split and fragment and shatter down to smaller pieces. Or people will be like, I want to sort of join a server where everybody is. And so they, collect around one server, like Mastodon Social, 10 Forward, something like that. And those servers sort of grow and grow and grow in size. And so you actually get this compromise between them both, where you get small specialized communities, such as our Mastodon instance, which is, super small. Or you get these big giant ones like Universal Dawn, Mastodon Social and all that, where this is much more sort of like a centralized feel. And you don't really necessarily have to worry about sort of signing up or moderation and all that necessarily. But of course, because they're bigger in terms of scale, they have more issues with shared community standards, moderation issues, and all that. And so it basically just allows human incentive to sort of balance things out on the whole. And as for institutional stuff, well, there's nothing stopping, say a city from coming up and saying, hey, we're going to just create our own Mastodon instance and give anybody an account who lives within here. Well, now you've got institutional control, someone to sort of set up and outsource that. And great, you don't like your city account, nobody's forcing you to use it. You're like, I've got multiple Mastodon, accounts and all that, and there's nothing stopping you from doing that. You don't like your city-based one, sign up to a different one. Go right ahead.
To some extent, there is an idea that a certain amount of social media is compulsory now. There's a lot of careers that for a long time they were telling you, if you want to make it in this particular career, you need to be on Twitter. End of story. You can't you're not going to eat anything your way in the side hatch. You got to be on Twitter. That was particularly writers, journalists, comedians, but comedians basically writers. They were all basically like, hey, no choice, you're here, right? And there's I think that there's some other ones as well that I don't not coming to mind offhand, but like there's again, it's that size thing. The one that everybody is on is the one that you've got to be on if you're in one of these situations where it's just part of the expectation of your field. It's funny to me that like as toxic and horrid and like much reviled as it has become internationally as Twitter is, like there's still official government entities and corporations that have accounts on. It's just so wild to me that like literally the create wacky dookie Nazi lunatic fringe violent like cockfighting like your grandma like a social media platform has FBI.gov on it. I'm just I don't know, it's just
Yeah, but
Yeah.
that's because those kinds of institutions just have a lot of inertia. I mean,
Mhm.
for a short shining time, Twitter was a great place for a specialist science that you could get on there and you could just follow a bunch of people and they would lead you to all this interesting new science and it was all great. And then Musk has destroyed that, but those groups are still there and you can still find people
to the
plodding
extent that
away
they can.
trying to
There
do
are a
it.
lot of people that are leaving Twitter's in
Yes.
protest and stuff like that. So it's
Yeah.
diminishing rapidly, but like there are still some
Right.
people on there that haven't quite
Oh yeah.
pulled off the
Yeah,
motor
and
yet.
it's disintegrating though, but and the kinds of things that I think really helped it fall apart on Twitter was that Blue Sky implemented a bunch of tools that were really useful where you could set up a group of people and say, hey, if you want to follow these people and you send out a single message and there's a link you follow and you just click on it and you instantly follow everybody on it, which is the kind of thing arachnologists needed is to be able to find all the arachnology people and so forth. So, there's ways to implement better better group formation.
Well, and I mean, what's stopping, say, a municipality from saying, okay, we're going to launch a Mastodon instance, but we're not going to let anyone sign up. We're going to create one or two bot accounts. They are hitched up to the RSS feed or the news feed of various government services and all that. And they make all their posts public. So even if you don't have a Mastodon account, you can literally just go to the site and treat it like it's a website and just sort of scroll down the social media feed. And they're paying $30 a month for that. Sorry, $30 a year for that. Like, there are ways to sort of, handle these sorts of things. And then they could potentially expand out, like, okay, let's give the mayor an official account to allow them to make various announcements and all that. Or, oh, maybe there's some deputies and all that we can maybe give social media to or that. Or they can set up a separate one for that. It's
But
really
$30 a
maddening.
year, then Doge is going to come along and destroy it.
Well, they can try, certainly, but
Yeah.
would, but like, yeah, this again is sort of the frustration of, well, we've got to be on Twitter because that's where everybody is. And it's like, well, You can also, create a Mastodon instance and have it publicly searchable on the web, and everybody can still see it, but you're not
Yeah.
beholden to Musk. So,
Right. Well, I've been off Twitter for 2 years now, so it's not that hard.
yeah, and Blue Sky has come up a couple of times on here, and
Yeah.
I'm getting very shady vibes off of them, I will say. Like they present themselves as being decentralized and all that, but
They're not.
they're not. No, no, no.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I'm fairly optimistic about Blue Sky so far, but I could see where it could easily go right off the rails. You know, just like Twitter did. All you need is one guy with a whole bunch of money coming along and taking over. And I could see that happening. It hasn't
Yeah,
yet, but it could.
Mhm.
We don't have any safeguards against that.
it's just chaos theory.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I really sort of wonder how exactly they sort of set things up within there. So, blocks, for instance, are public. If you block someone on Blue Sky, the person you're blocking knows they're being blocked. Like, there's no way around that. It's actually built into the system itself. Not only that, but all of your data is in fact public. You've got a personal data server, yeah, which actually is responsible for sort of sharing it out. And everything on there is public. Anybody can sort of come in and access it, as far as I know. I've been looking to see, okay, what's the exact mechanism for talking with that? Like, for instance, when it comes to Mastodon and all that, each instance actually has to authenticate with each other. So in theory, we're talking instance to instance, and there's some level of trust, a bit. I mean, this is open source software, so yeah. But nonetheless, when it comes to, Blue Sky and all that, your data is just sitting out there in public. Which, okay, okay, somebody blocks you and all that, but you're like, no, I still want to sort of follow them. You just go to their personal data store and all that, and just download all their data, and okay, like you're still following them. Oh, in what way is a block a block in that sense? And like I was listening to a recap of a recent interview with the CEO of Blue Sky and all that, where they're talking about how they plan to make money. And they had two. I've actually heard a variety of different ways they were doing it. One way was just sort of inserting ads into the feed and all that. And they can sort of get away with it because they've got this big thing called a relay, which you have to sort of subscribe to get all your posts coming from. And, if you control the relay, then you can start feeding in ads and all that and forcing people to read them and all that. But actually this time around, ads never came up. Their plans instead were either a marketplace, where people could actually sort of come and, get access to various apps and all that. Or they could trade access to, they could have subscription fees to get access to various subgroups. So for instance, the person here specifically mentioned Black Sky as an example of that. Now, Black Sky, I don't know if you're not aware of it, is actually a bunch of people of color and all that on Blue Sky who really do not like the way Blue Sky Inc. is sort of moderating the platform and all that, and want to create their own infrastructure. They like the protocols and all that behind it. It's expanded quite a bit larger than the Fediverse in general. They sort of want to keep that momentum going, but they want to do it on their terms. And so they're actually building out their own infrastructure, which presumably is going to be compatible with Blue Sky itself. But where they're sort of in control of it. This is actually sort of like a definitely decentralization and all that. So how would you charge access to that? It doesn't really make any sense. And when you start to factor in that, oh yeah, Blue Sky is actually getting a lot of their funds from venture capital. In fact, not just venture capital, but also cryptocurrency adjacent venture capital. Things really start to get, kind of dodgy and dicey and all that.
Well, you kind of lost my enthusiasm for Blue Sky when you said they were talking about how we can make money.
Hmm.
I think that's the root of all evil, of course, is all of these social media institutions setting up, and their ultimate goal is to make lots of money. But I don't think that's the case for Mastodon, at least. The Fediverse seems to be committed to the idea that no, you just do what you want. Don't worry about making money off of this. I'm sure somebody can think of a way to make money off of a Mastodon instance,
Oh
but
yeah.
I don't know what they could do.
Oh, I can think of
Yeah.
several. But the point, though, is because it's free and open source software and it's interoperable with itself, you don't like that. You just create up your own instance and you're good. You're good.
Yes, but
So
if for instance, Free Thought Blogs Online started pushing ads everywhere, I think what would happen is we'd get cut out of all the other instances.
if we're being very spammy, like literally every account
Yeah.
on here actually is really just sort of doing spam related things, then yeah, in theory they could. But conversely, they also can't take us offline. As long as I'm paying my $30 a year and all that, we're going to just keep chugging along. And assuming, of course, the Cloudflare and all the other things, keep on chugging as well, then yeah, we're just going to keep on chugging. Nobody can control us.
Yeah, and that's
But
fine. I don't care if somebody has got a social media account that's all about selling hamburgers. Go ahead. I'm just not going to subscribe to it and I'm not going to pay any attention to you,
yeah,
which is what we want is the freedom to choose.
exactly. And there are, Mastodon instances which are literally nothing but that. Like I actually have a bit of a beef with Flipboard, for instance. They run a Mastodon instance, and a lot of what their thing actually is really just sort of keying into the various RSS feeds of various news agencies and all that, and just sort of repeating essentially what's there. They might actually
Oh,
add like a little bit of a human-based summary or even an AI summary, not sure. But literally, they're just sort of like an RSS feed of news sites and all that. And I'm like, that's it? That's all you're going to sort of do for that? I
do
mean,
they
if they
make money off of this though?
presumably in some ways. I mean, I don't know exactly what their monetization policy
Yeah,
is, but certainly it's very cheap to run. You're literally just sort of hooking it to RSS feeds, and you need minimal manpower. So it's just a matter of paying the bills, and of hosting the instance itself. And as I've said multiple times, running a Mastodon instance itself is super cheap. So
right. Well, I hate to say this, but our hour is up. We need to wind it up. We've already lost baby. She took off.
mhm.
Maybe your computer died on her or something. Uh, so I think all we have to plug is Free Thought Blogs Online.
Indeed. Yes, this is our Mastodon instance. It's a pain in the butt to get into, but there are blog posts on my blog, Reprobate Spreadsheet, talking about how you could potentially sign up for it. If you think I'm being a bit of a tinfoil dictator and you hate that sort of thing, there are actually free thought bloggers who have accounts on different instances. And there are people, I know who've just like, screw you, I'm just going to sign up for Mastodon Social. And that's perfectly fine. You don't
Yep.
have to be on our instance. That's fine.
Yes, and I didn't have any problems getting on Free Thought Blogs Online. I guess I'm special. Uh,
Yes.
although I had the reason I had to switch and commit to just using Free Thought Blogs Online is another little problem with the Fediverse in that my old instance, Octodon, uh, the person managing it just got tired of it and said they were going to shut it down. So all
Yes.
of a sudden, I had to jump ship. Well, not too sudden. She gave us what, like 6 months, a year warning.
Oh, that's nice, actually.
Yeah, of course, I procrastinated until the last month, but yeah,
Yeah, this is the downside. Especially on Mastodon itself, you can run your instance how you want. So imagine, I was like, no, I'm going to run Free Thought Blogs as the spot for skeptics and atheists. I'm going to get everybody I can on here. Everybody's going to join up. Everybody's getting an account. We grow and we have like tens of thousands of users and all that. Well, I'm not really getting much money from running the thing, right? As we sort of alluded to, in the Fediverse in general, it's very tough to actually sort of monetize that because of its ease of splitting off and all that. So I'm probably, running the infrastructure, barely sort of eking out money and all that. Difficult to get moderators for it. I can't really afford to pay them or anything like that. You can imagine this as a recipe for burnout. Whereas if it's something like our current instance where I don't do that, and you can count the number of active users on one hand, what's the moderation problem? Like, how exactly am I going to burn out from moderating the instance? I'm not. This is me just sort of, the only thing that could potentially take us down would be, the government somehow getting a bug that, oh, we got to shut down all Mastodon instances. Or, my hosters deciding not to play nice with the free things. In which case, okay, maybe I'm paying, like $20 a month or something like that now. Okay, bad, but tolerable.
sure. Yeah.
So that, I mean, that is again the downside. You run the instance the way you want. And if you want to be big and have everybody on, then you're going to you're going to get burnt out and you're going to sort of collapse and fail. If you keep yourself small, you can go along for a long time.
Well, this is the problem of capitalism, always wanting constant, infinite growth. And just saying no to that, I think, is a good progressive first step. Just let's be limited. Let's say, here's what we're going to do. This is what we'll support. And that's all we're going to do.
Exactly. And I mean, with the Fediverse, you get your choice.
Right. Okay. So that's a good positive message to end on. Let's say goodbye to everybody. And I'll be clicking the button and turning us off if I can
Goodbye to
find it.
everybody. Woo!
I lost
Yeah,
it.
so I'm at Reprobate spreadsheet on Free Thought Blogs. PZ Myers is on Pharangula, last I checked. So you can head over there
Still
if you want to.
there.
Still there?
Yeah.
So you can check him out.
Okay. Until next month, we'll see you later.
Indeed. See y'all.
Okay, we're done.
Yeah, the chat wasn't too bad.